Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on the Morning Majority. I want to take you back in time to March 30th of 1981, outside the Washington Hilton Hotel. By the way, we in the news business sometimes refer to that in a sort of a morbid way as the Hinckley Hilton, because that's where John Hinckley almost killed Ronald Reagan. I mean, it was a moment that is seared in our national memory, and since then, basically, Hinckley has been at St. E's. He's been getting a little more freedom over the years, but starting today, there's going to be a whole series of hearings that are designed basically to give him more freedom. Del Wilber has written a definitive account of what happened that day back in 1981 in a book called Rawhide Down. He's a Washington Post reporter, and he's on the phone with us now to talk about these hearings. Del, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk about what Hinckley's lawyers are trying to gain here.
Well, you know, as we know, Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity for shooting Reagan and 3 other men, and was been held at St. E's, as you said, since 1982. But over the years, he's been granted more freedom, and the hospital, you know, eventually wants him released. They want to be able to release him. I've treated him for his, you know, mental issues, and to release him. And right now, they want him to have this, you know, be able to have like 24-day unaccompanied visits to Williamsburg, and to eventually have the authority to release him permanently. They're asking a judge for this power. Federal prosecutors are fighting this. They're going to fight this hospital proposal. On the other side are Hinckley's lawyers that are advocating for the proposal. So they're going to be clashing. It's going to be like a drag-out boxing match here in U.S. District Court starting today through next Friday over this issue. Should Hinckley get more freedom, and should the hospital have the power to put him on convalescent leave and release him into Richmond?
Now, his attorneys and the hospital are claiming that he's better?
Well, you know, they say that you know, he's gotten better over time, and that, you know, his major mental issues, you know, depression and an unspecified psychiatric disorder, have been in remission. He's still narcissistic. I mean, it's just, but what's interesting about these hearings, too, is it, like, makes history alive. You know, I mean, you're 15 feet from this guy who shot the president, nearly killed him, as you said, and you just realize, you know, how important this is. You have, you know, his lawyer saying he's been rehabilitated, you know, he's better, he can be released. Prosecutors mentioned in these court papers the devastation he wreaked, you know, on March 30th, 1981. I mean, I gave a speech at the Reagan Library after my book came out in March, and Nancy Reagan was in the front row. And Jerry Parr, the agent who saves Reagan's life not once but twice on this day, came up to Jerry. He was with me, and she went up to Jerry, and I heard her say this. She said, "Jerry, thanks for giving me my life back." I mean, this is 30 years later. You know, this is very real to these people.
Sure.
And here's this guy who, you know, unleashed 6 shots in 1.7 seconds and lodged a bullet just an inch from Reagan's heart. You know, and the president, you know, it recalibrated his entire presidency, this shooting. I mean, it's hard to understand. You sit in these hearings and you write these stories, and, you know, you're doing them, you know, you're a newsman, so you're doing this stuff, and you kind of like, oh, one side says this, another side says this, but if you take yourself back in time, I mean, Reagan's on the operating room as they're hunting frantically for a bullet they think is going to shoot into his brain, and Hinckley didn't almost change history. He did.
Have you ever?
Here he is. He's right here.
You said 15 feet away from him. Have you ever spoken with him, or has any reporter ever spoken with John Hinckley since this incident?
No, I think in the early 80s he gave a bunch of media interviews, and they eventually stopped that. He did, and the judge ordered him not to do it when he's on visits to his hometown because he's narcissistic. And if he gives media interviews, it feeds the narcissism, which makes arguments against him being released easier. And so he doesn't do media interviews. I mean, for my book, I tried to interview him. I sent him letters, and he ignored them. And, you know, he sits in these hearings. It's really fascinating. You'll be in these hearings, and it's like someone, like, you know, if you go to bed and someone took a mask of your face, perfect mask, and then you wake up, and they put that mask back on your face, and I start asking you intimate questions about your sex life, you know, how lonely you are, how you can't make friends, and not a shred of emotion comes out. It's like you're sleeping, but your eyes are open.
Mm-hmm.
That's him.
Right.
He has a very flat effect. It's very strange.
What about his family?
His mother's 86. She'll be there. His brother and sister have come to the last hearings and testified. I imagine they'll be here today, too, and they'll testify. They're often the first witnesses put on by Hinckley's lawyers. They'll get cross-examined. In one, in the court filing, the prosecutor said that the brother, Scott Hinckley, has said he's not sure this Williamsburg solution will work. That, he may not. The prosecutors don't think that this Williamsburg thing will work long term because he doesn't have the support network. And if you go back to 1981, Hinckley's kind of a lazy guy, a loner. He gets obsessed with Jodie Foster. He has all these issues with women, but he gets obsessed with Jodie Foster and shoots Reagan, thinking that he's going to impress her. And he's having these strange relationships with women again. He's hunting on the internet for a picture of his female dentist. And then he lies about it, according to prosecutors. And these other issues are going to come up. It's going to be an interesting back and forth between these two sides. Well, everyone has issues with women, well, of course, but people with issues with women also didn't shoot the president of the United States and permanently disable the press secretary.
Let me play a little devil's advocate here. Sarah Jane Moore, the would-be assassin of Ford, was released after 30-something years in prison I believe a couple years ago.
Hinckley, Bremer, the guy who shot Wallace, was released.
Right. Hinckley was found not guilty. Does it become harder to make the argument that, hey, he shouldn't get his freedom after 30-something years?
I think that prosecutors are in an interesting spot because at the trial, remember, they argued he was sane.
Right.
Now they say, no, he's crazy. He can't be released. He's still a danger. I think that their arguments, particularly the more they can tie it to his relationships with women and his deceit, because that was at the basis of Hinckley back in 81. Remember, in 1981, that's Jodie Foster. He tracks across the country to D.C., reads the president's schedule in the newspaper, and goes out and shoots him. Unleashes 6 shots in 1.7 seconds, still clicking the trigger as he's tackled. This is a guy who is determined. Before he shot him, he thought, should I? But he expected to die in a hail of gunfire. But he did all this over a woman, and over the years he had lied. He was under treatment by a psychiatrist in 1981, and he told him, he mentioned Foster's obsession and his obsession with guns and never came up again. But he had a diary he was keeping for this guy telling him, I was walking around the mall thinking about my future and stuff. No, that day. He wasn't. He was at a gun range taking target practice.
All right, but here's the bottom line to me, though. No matter what the prosecutors say or defense say, what do the doctors say? I mean, do they think he's still crazy? Do they think he's insane?
Well, they think he's still narcissistic, which is a problem. And they think he's a lot better, obviously, or they wouldn't be pushing for him to be released. But remember, from the prosecutor's side, these doctors they want to be able to show that they can rehabilitate someone. Prosecutors are very nervous about that. They are not sure that he's ready. And they bring their own experts. The prosecutors are going to have their own psychiatrists testify. Yeah. It's like the Hinckley trial all over again. At the trial, the facts of the case were 2 days out of a 6-week trial. 2 days were about the facts of what happened. Everything else was about this guy's mind.
All right, great to have you on. By the way, it's an awesome book about that day, Rawhide Down, the near assassination of Ronald Reagan. Del Wilber from the Washington Post. Thanks.
Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, whatever.
All right, sounds great.
Thanks, Del.
We appreciate it.